I've worked the overnight watch at the Kettleness relay station for 11 years, and the noise floor has taught me more than any manual ever did. Most nights it is exactly what it sounds like: hiss, drift, the occasional fishing trawler's radio chatter bouncing off a weather layer. You learn to let it wash past you. You also learn, eventually, the difference between noise that is nothing and noise that is something wearing nothing's clothes. That night in March, the floor had a hairline in it. Half a second, repeating every 40 minutes, riding just under the legacy emergency band we still monitor out of habit more than expectation. Nobody had broadcast on that band in years. It belonged to a maritime distress protocol, so old most of my colleagues didn't know it still existed, let alone that Kettleness still kept an ear on it. I could have logged it as instrument bleed and gone back to my coffee. The shift before me probably had, twice, judging by the unflagged entries in the log. But the hairline had structure. A real signal does not repeat at the same interval for no reason, and this one did, clean as a metronome, 40 minutes on the second. I pulled the raw capture and ran it slow. Underneath the noise was a fragment, not words, not anything built for a human ear, but a pulse train with the unmistakable shape of a status ping, the kind a ship sends to its own fleet to say, "I am here and I am not yet finished sinking." It had no business on our band at all. Something out there was leaking, and the leak had found the one frequency on Earth still old enough and still listened to catch it. I ran the waveform against every legacy template we had on file. Nothing fit cleanly, which told me something on its own. Whatever this was predated the last time anyone had bothered to update our reference library for that band. I cross-checked the bearing against shipping lanes, weather buoys, every satellite footprint that might have thrown off a stray reflection. None of it lined up. The hairline kept its rhythm the whole time I worked, patient and indifferent to whether anyone on Earth ever noticed it. 40 minutes between pulses, never early, never late. There is a specific feeling that comes with realizing a signal is not a malfunction in your own gear. It is a small, cold certainty, the kind that makes you sit up straighter in a chair you've sat in for 11 years without thinking about it once. I had it that night. Whatever was leaking onto our band did not know we existed, did not care whether we existed, and was simply dying on a frequency old enough that almost nobody left alive would have thought to keep listening to it. I did what the job actually requires, which is not panic and not shrug. I flagged it priority, traced the bearing as best the array could manage, and called it up to Fleet Watch at Drumheug with everything I had: bearing, interval, signal shape, and the plain statement that whatever this was, it was bleeding distress on a band nobody used by accident for fun. Drumheug asked me twice if I was certain it wasn't drift. I told them I'd bet my pension on it. They sat on that for 4 minutes that felt considerably longer, and then they gave the order I'd hoped for and not expected. Divert the Corvette Aldermore, currently running a routine patrol, loop 2 systems out, and have her investigate. I want to be honest about what that decision actually was, because from where I sat it looked very small. One ship. Not a fleet, not a relief convoy, just a Corvette already tired from her own patrol, sent to go find out what a 40-minute hairline in old hardware actually meant. Nobody at Drumheug made a speech about it. The duty officer just said, "Send Aldermore," the way you tell someone to go check on a smoke smell before it became a fire. That is the whole of how it happened on our end. No ceremony. Just a watch officer who refused to call something nothing, and a chain of people above her willing to spend a ship's fuel on a guess that turned out not to be a guess at all. I did not know, that night, whose ship it was. I only found that out afterward, from the after-action packet that came back through Drumheug weeks later, and from a recorded exchange I was allowed to hear because I was the one who'd flagged the leak in the first place. The ship was called the Hollow Reed, an escort cutter belonging to a fleet none of us had any treaty with, none of us had ever met, drifting half-crippled after a reactor strike that had taken out her main array and left her limping on backup power. Her status pings were never meant to cross into anyone else's space. let alone leak across the Gulf onto a human band laid down for fishing boats a century before anyone on Earth knew there was anyone else to talk to. The leak was a fault in a damaged transmitter, nothing more. A half-second of bleed every 40 minutes because that was as often as the failing hardware could manage a pulse at all. Her junior comms officer, a woman named Vel Ashcoren, was the one running the board when Aldermore's hail came through. I have listened to the recording more times than I probably should. There is a long, flat silence after the hail registers, not panic, nothing close to it, just the particular quiet of someone doing arithmetic that refuses to add up. Her own fleet was 4 days out at best speed. She had sent nothing toward the human sphere. She had sent nothing toward anyone but her own people, on her own frequency, aimed at her own fleet's relay and nowhere else. "Confirm your identity," she said, careful level. "We did not signal you. This frequency was not directed at your people." Aldermore's captain answered the way I would have wanted any of mine to answer. "We know. Your status pulse bled onto an old emergency band of ours. We don't get many of those anymore, so when we get one, we come look." A pause, and then, because he was apparently a man who believed in saying the plain thing plainly, close enough to a distress call for us. There was another silence after that, shorter, and into it Vel Ashcoren said the line that ended up in the after-action report verbatim, because somebody on the Aldermore thought it worth preserving. "We did not aim this at you. We did not ask you. You came regardless." "We heard a hairline that didn't belong," the captain said. "We don't generally need to be asked." What followed was not dramatic by the standards of war stories. Aldermore matched the hollow reed's drift, ran a tow line, and walked her clear of a debris field her own navigation had been too degraded to plot around. The recording captured more of it than I expected. The clang of the docking collar finding purchase, a long exhale from someone on the reed's bridge that wasn't quite Vel Ashcoren's voice, and underneath it all the flat, procedural back and forth of two crews who had never trained together suddenly running a tow checklist as if they had. Life support on the Reed had perhaps 6 hours left in it when the Corvette arrived. The math on that, when I read it later, made my hands go cold in a way the original signal never had. 6 hours of air for a crew that never sent for help, found anyway, because somebody at a cliffside station with a coffee gone cold refused to call a hairline nothing. There is one more exchange in the transcript I keep coming back to. Once the tow line was secure, Vel Ashcoren asked the Aldermore's captain, almost as an afterthought, what would have happened if Kettleness had logged the leak as drift and gone back to coffee, the way I very nearly had. The captain didn't have an answer for that, and to his credit he didn't pretend to. "Then nobody comes," he said. "That's the whole of it. There's no backup plan for a signal nobody catches." It was the flattest thing said in the entire recording, and somehow the one that stayed with me longest. I never spoke to Vel Ashcoren myself. I only know her name from the report and that one recorded line. But I think about her sometimes, on quiet nights when the floor is just noise again, about the shape of realizing that the people standing between you and dying were never people you called, never people you knew existed, and came anyway because a half-second of your own dying hardware happened to land somewhere still listening. We logged it in the end the way we log everything. Leak source identified, signal traced, vessel located, assistance rendered, no further action required. 4 lines. Nobody at Kettleness got a medal, and nobody on the hollow reed sent one of those long, grateful messages you sometimes hear about in stories like this. What we got instead, 3 weeks later, was a short, formally worded note from a fleet command we'd never heard of, thanking us for not switching off a frequency that, by their own admission, they had never expected anyone to be listening to at all. I kept that note. I still have it pinned above my console at Kettleness, not because it says anything remarkable, but because of the one line near the bottom that I think gets closer to the truth of the whole business than anything else written about it before or since. "You were not who we called. You were simply who heard." That's the job as far as I've ever understood it. You don't get to choose who bleeds onto your band at 3 in the morning. You only get to choose whether you call it nothing or you call it in.